Chapter 20. Rose had once again lost all track of time as she struggled with her bonds. As quietly as possible, she had wiggled and tugged, this time using her teeth to assist, as she tried to untie the knots holding her captive. She almost sobbed with relief when she got her hands free. Striving for silence, she turned in her chair to fight with the rope holding her to it. She made short work of that too, and was soon free. But now she faced the question of what to do next. If Squint woke up and discovered her freed, she might really be in the suds then. She dithered for another couple of moments, looking between the filthy window closer to her and the doorway just beyond the sleeping Squint. The window would be a safer bet on the one hand, but there was no way of knowing if it would even open. Then she remembered that her supposed guard had not woken until Broderick had kicked him, so she thought he must be a terribly heavy sleeper. She decided to take her chances and tiptoed quietly past him. Holding her breath, she opened the door, praying there would be no squeak to give her away. Within the space of a few heartbeats, she was out the door and sighing with relief. She gave up on tiptoeing, picking up her skirts, and ran for her life. Rose must have made too much noise, for she could hear Squint clambering after her. She saw a door at the end of the hallway, and burst through it out into bright sunlight. Looking around, she was stunned to see Alex in the distance, along with Lord Dunbar. Running as fast as her feet would carry her, she dashed toward him. "Alex!" she screamed as he turned toward her. She threw herself into his waiting arms. Sobbing with relief, she clung to him as Squint, rather dull in intellect, ran after her, not realizing that he was endangering himself. Wesley quickly subdued him, while Alex was occupied with soothing the young lady on the verge of hysterics. "I cannot believe you were so close," she was babbling. "I could have waited for you and you would have found me." "It is not in your nature to wait around for rescue, though, is it, my darling?" Alex used the endearment without either of them noticing. "Besides, it is just as well that you did rescue yourself, as it seems we were slightly off in our directions. We had reason to believe you were in the set of sheds next to the one you were in. It would have taken us some time to get to yours." "True, but Broderick would never have been able to come for me with you and your men searching the area." "Speaking of Broderick, have you any idea what he is up to? Now that you're safe, we should probably see about thwarting him once and for all." Alex could not make himself let go of Rose, but he did lift his head to look about. At that moment, Rose's father approached. "What is the meaning of this, your grace? I would ask that you unhand my daughter this instant." Rose felt the rush of embarrassment heating her face as she tried to pull away from Alex. In the fierce emotions that had dogged her during her escape, she had failed to notice that she was still clinging to the Duke. She realized he must have felt the same as he was slow to release her. After a moment, he let her go and she ran to her father. Lord Smythe engulfed his daughter in a fierce hug before holding her away from him and examining her closely. "Did that wretched man hurt you in any way?" He gasped when he saw the blood-stained cloths wrapped around her wrists. "Good heavens, child! What happened?" Rose followed his gaze to her wrists and blushed guiltily, trying to hide them from sight, as she realized that all the men were staring at her, awaiting an explanation. "Perhaps we could be getting along home now, Papa. I would dearly love a bath and perhaps a meal, and a change of clothes would not be amiss either." Yes, of course, my dear, but pray tell, what happened to your wrists? Did Broderick cut you?" Lord Smythe tried not to be demanding, but he wanted to disembowel the cretin who had so harmed his only daughter. "No, Papa. I did this to myself, actually." "How could you have possibly done that to yourself?" Alex demanded, incredulous. "Through the night, my arms were tied behind my back. I had hoped to escape at first light and make my way home before my absence would be noticed. I struggled against the ropes for hours. This is the result." "Well, it cannot be said that you did that to yourself. You did not tie yourself up. Any right-minded individual would do their best to escape. Broderick did this to you. For that, he will pay." Alex looked so fierce as he said those words that Rose could not help the grin that broke over her face. "Could we please leave, Papa? Your Grace? I have no wish to remain here another moment." Those last words were not as strong leaving her mouth as she would have wished, and to her chagrin, she felt her legs giving way weakly. In the blink of an eye, Alex was there, scooping her into his arms, disregarding Lord Smythe's objections. "Never mind your protestations, my lord. Clearly she is worn out and needs to be escorted home. Let us see her there safely, and then we will deal with the rest." Turning to Wesley, he gave him an assignment. "Dunbar, could you remain here with a couple of the men in case Broderick returns? If you capture him, send word. We will see Rosie home safely, and then spread out through the city to capture him. Rose had been about to tell me what he was scheming." Rose chose that moment to revive herself. "He is trying to get the prince to sign over the lands being negotiated from France to him. That is why he wants to keep Papa occupied, so he cannot thwart his plans. He was hoping to ensnare the backing of the Duke of Wrentham to assist his efforts, but when that did not work out as planned, he decided to prevent Papa from going to Paris for the negotiations." Looking into Alex's eyes shyly, she whispered, "You can put me down now, Your Grace. I am fairly certain that I can walk under my own steam." "Never," he whispered back with a smile. "You need to rest." Rose relaxed slightly, enjoying the shiver of pleasure that shimmied up her spine at his masterful ways. Within minutes, they were in a carriage and on the way to the Smythe residence. Alex had to relinquish his hold on her when he placed her on the seat, and the Baron had been quick to take his seat next to his daughter. He sat glaring at the Duke for the duration of the ride. Alex ignored the hostility, smiling calmly as they drove. Rose looked between the two men curiously, wondering how they came to be cooperating together, but she was too tired to ask about it. Things moved quickly as soon as they got home. Rose was bundled into the house through the servants' entrance at the back. Her mother cried and fussed over her, as did her maid. A bath was quickly drawn for her, and her wounds anointed with ointment. The gentlemen took themselves off to avenge themselves upon her captor. Before long, Rose was tucked up into bed to sleep off the rigours of her ordeal. Some hours later, Rose groggily climbed from the bed, facing the eager attentions of her loyal maid. "Oh, miss, I am ever so glad to see you alive and well. We were all so terribly worried about you. He's been awful being stuck here, not being able to do anything. At least the men were able to dart about searching for you. All we could do was sit about wringing our hands and worrying." "I am so sorry that everyone was put to such trouble over me." "Don't be daft, Miss Rose. You didn't ask for this trouble, and of course we would worry over you. Everyone loves you." "Thank you, Mary. Do you know how my mother is? I was so tired when I got home I could hardly see straight, but I did notice that she looked rather drawn." "She stayed up most of the night waiting for word. His Grace and your father were in and out throughout the night, searching for you, and waiting for news from their different sources." "Does it not strike you as strange that my father and the Duke have been cooperating over this?" "Somewhat, yes, miss. But maybe you won't have to be the one to broker the peace after all. Perhaps it has already been negotiated." "Now that I find hard to believe, Mary." As they were talking, Mary had helped Rose to dress in a simple day gown of pale yellow sprig muslin, with long sleeves to nicely cover her bandages, despite the early evening hour. "Surely Mamma has sent our regrets to whichever entertainments we were supposed to attend." As Mary was just putting the finishing touches to her hairstyle, there was a scratching at the door. "Come in," Rose called, admitting her anxious mother. "You look remarkably lovely, my dear," Lady Smythe said with a lightness that Rose had not witnessed in her in years. "Thank you, Mamma," Rose said with a smile. "Looking at you, no one would ever believe you have just escaped the clutches of a madman." Rose blinked at her mother. "You seem remarkably sanguine about the entire affair, Mamma." "I, too, had a nap, and it did me the world of good. It is so wonderful to have you home, safe and sound." Looking into the mirror, the two shared a look of warm companionship. Lady Smythe inquired politely, "Are you truly as comfortable as you look, my dear? Should we have called for the doctor to attend to your injuries? Are you certain there is nothing else hurt on you?" "I am quite certain. My main concern at the moment is how very hungry I am. Even my wrists are not causing me much discomfort. The housekeeper's concoction has worked wonders for my scratches. Now all I can think of is to eat." "Well, then you are in luck. The kitchen staff has been expending themselves all afternoon as you slept, making all your favourite dishes. If you are ready, they will be serving it momentarily." The two Smythe ladies made their way down to the dining-room in companionable silence. Lady Smythe had her arm around her daughter, reluctant to take her hands off her. Rose was surprised at the display of affection. Her surprise was to exceed its bounds as she entered the dining-room to see the Duke of Wrentham seated conversing quietly with her father. Rose gazed wonderingly between the two men. Lord Smythe stepped forward to kiss her gently on the cheek, and Alex winked at her when no one was looking. When no explanation of his surprising presence was offered, she smiled crookedly at them both and allowed her mother to guide her to a seat. Dinner was a quiet affair. Just as they sat down, Lord Smythe assured his daughter that Sir Jason Broderick was safely confined, no longer a threat to her or the prince, but everyone at the table silently agreed not to discuss it for the duration of the meal. It would be much safer for everyone's digestion if they stuck to innocuous topics such as the latest undies or which play they had enjoyed most this season. "We have received word that your brother should be arriving later this evening. Apparently their crossing was rough, and it took longer than expected." Lady Smythe seemed so excited at the prospect of welcoming her son home. Rose attributed her altered manner to that, and relief over her own safety. Rose was highly amused at the politeness everyone was displaying. The last time she had seen her parents in the same room as a Wrentham, cutting words had been hurled from both sides. She assumed the truce had to do with their mutual efforts to save her and thwart Broderick. So she was stunned into silence when the dishes were removed, and her father turned to her to say, "It would seem the Duke has some things he wishes to discuss with you, my dear. The two of you may sit in the receiving room for a few minutes while your mother and I go to my library to enjoy the fire I am sure the footmen have started there." Blinking in confusion, Rose did not resist as Alex pulled her seat back for her and offered his elbow. She wondered if she was still dreaming as he escorted her to the ivory room at the front of the house. Settling herself on the settee, Rose blushed with pleasure when Alex sat closely beside her and did not release her arm. Instead, he held her hand gently and stared at the bandages covering her wrists. "I am so sorry for the pain you have had to endure these 2 days," he began earnestly. "Oh, Alex," Rose sighed. "This can hardly be considered your fault. I should never have gone off with Broderick, but when he said he had my mother, I could not think fast enough to resist as he escorted me from the room." "Ah, so your father was right. He figured some sort of a threat must have been made against a loved one to make you cooperate." "How did you know something had happened to me? And how has it transpired that you and my father are getting along so well? I thought we hated each other." "I never hated you, Rosie, and I dearly hope you do not hate me either." Rose blushed and looked away, not answering his question. He did not pursue it at the moment, instead answering her first question. "Lady Elizabeth alerted me almost immediately. She had seen you leave the ballroom with Broderick, and right away was suspicious that all was not right. Unfortunately, by the time I was able to discover your whereabouts, I was just in time to see his carriage leaving the Rotherhams' property. I had already had men posted to watch your house, hoping to keep you safe, so I came right away to tell your father what had happened and to see if my men knew anything." "But how did you manage to get my father to be so pleasant to you? And my mother? She seems to be a different person than she has been in ever so long. It is lovely, but strange." Again, Alex ignored her questions. He had one of his own that he was burning to ask, and he wanted to know her truthful answer. "Rosie, my dear, your father told you I have something to discuss with you." Seeing her stifling a yawn, he was quick to ask, "Do you feel up to a conversation now, or should I let you get some sleep? I could return tomorrow." Rose was exhausted, but she could not bear for this particular dream to end just yet. She clung to his hand and shook her head. "I am perfectly fine, Your Grace. Thank you for asking." Alex smiled into his beloved's eyes. "You lie very sweetly, my dear. I will try not to keep you for too long, but I am relieved that you will not make me wait until the morrow. I do believe I would expire from the suspense." Rose grinned at his foolishness. "Well, then, get on with it. I highly doubt my parents will leave us alone for overlong, anyway." "Rosie, my darling," he began haltingly as Rose grew serious. Noticing his use of the term of endearment, her eyes grew round with her amazement. "You have been my dearest friend since you were 4 years old. It is true we have barely spoken for 3 years, but our association in the last several days has shown me that you have not changed. I have loved you since you were in pigtails and short skirts. Would you do me the great honour of becoming my Duchess?" Staring at him with her mouth slightly agape in her shock, Rose could not answer immediately. The first thing that popped out of her mouth was, "But Alex, I am neither gracious nor graceful. How can I possibly be a duchess?" "While I disagree fiercely with your assessment, when you are my Duchess it will not matter, for everyone will have to call you Your Grace regardless." Rose grinned at his words, but still stared at him as though he had lost his mind. "How could you possibly love me, Alex? Renthams hate Smythes. Your mother would never allow it, and your father would roll over in his grave. Besides, my parents, did they know what you wanted to discuss with me?" "They did, as a matter of fact," Alex replied, leaving her speechless once again. He took advantage of her silence to prod further. "It matters not what anyone else thinks. How do you feel about it?" He began to worry at her continued silence, so he began to bargain with her. "I know you have not been enjoying the season, and you feel that settling into domestic life will be a letdown after the excitement you have experienced in Vienna. Would you agree to be my Duchess if I promised to find us more adventures?" Taking a moment to entertain the thought, Rose allowed all the feelings that had been growing in her heart over the past weeks, but that she had been fiercely suppressing, to flow over her in waves of warmth. Looking at her dearest friend beside her, she knew her love was undoubtedly beaming from her eyes. "After the events of the past 2 days, I suspect I may have had enough adventure to last me for a while, Your Grace," she replied dryly, "although that is a highly romantic offer." She paused for a moment, clasping his hand tight. "I have loved you for as long as I can remember, Alex. When I was a little girl it was hero worship, but as I grew older it has changed. I would love nothing more than to be your wife." She was about to say more, expressing her doubts about their family's reception to his proposal, but he crushed her words by pulling her into his arms. The brief kiss they had shared previously, although thrilling, held nothing in comparison to the warm embrace they now shared. Alex poured all his feelings into the connection of their lips, while Rose accepted and returned them with fervour. Although inexperienced in matters of love, she made up for her lack of skill with her enthusiasm to demonstrate her feelings. They broke apart at the sound of footsteps in the hall. Blushing and laughing, Rose gazed at the man before her with wonderment. "Have you truly asked me to be your bride, or am I dreaming? And are you certain my father will accept this?" "You worry too much, my darling. You are soon to be a duchess. Everything will work itself out." And it did. The end. Dedication. My books have a recurring theme of friendship. In this book, the hero and heroine were childhood friends before a family feud ruins their relationship. When they are threatened from outside sources, though, they can't help but resume their loyalty to their old friendship, despite their family feud. I loved writing about their loyalty to one another, so this book is dedicated to all the loyal friends who stick to one another through thick and thin. Acknowledgements. My parents are my biggest fans in life. Without them, I would be nothing. My husband is my greatest support. My cover artist, JB Designs, did an outstanding job with this series. Thank you, Josephine. And last but most definitely not least, my editor, Julie Sherwood. Thank you for tightening things up for me. About the author. I've been writing pretty much since I learned to read when I was 5 years old. Of course, those early efforts were basically only something a mother could love. I put writing aside after I left school and stuck with reading. I am an avid reader. I love words. I will read anything, even the cereal box, signs, posters, etc. But my true love is novels. Almost 10 years ago, my husband dared me to write a book, instead of always reading them. I didn't think I'd be able to do it, but to my surprise, I love writing. Those early efforts eventually became my first published book, Tempting the Earl, published by Avalon Books in 2010. There were some ups and downs in my publishing efforts. My first publisher was sold, and I became an orphan author, back to the drawing board of trying to find a publishing house. It has been a thrilling adventure as I learned to navigate the world of publishing. I believe firmly that everyone deserves a happily ever after. I want my readers to be able to escape from the everyday for a little while and feel upbeat and refreshed when they get to the end of my books. When not reading or writing, I can be found traipsing around my neighborhood admiring the dogs and greenery, or traveling the world with my favorite companion. Stay in touch with Wendy on her website, www.wendymayandrews.com, or follow her on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok under the handle Wendy May Andrews.